My name is Arthur, and I clean crypts in New Orleans. Yeah, I know. It sounds like the setup to a bad joke or a really specific dating profile, but it's my life, or what's left of it anyway. Most people picture New Orleans as Mardi Gras, Bourbon Street, and jazz. They don't see the silent cities within the city, the cemeteries, above-ground tombs, stacked like spectral apartment complexes, holding the dead safe from the waterlogged earth. It's a unique job, demanding a unique kind of person. Someone who doesn't mind the constant whisper of the wind through iron gates, the smell of old stone and decay, and the ever-present chill that has nothing to do with the weather. I've been doing this for 15 years. Started as a kid, fresh out of high school, looking for anything that paid. My uncle, a grizzled old Creole who'd been in the business for 40 years, took me under his wing. He taught me how to scrub away centuries of grime, how to patch crumbling mortar, how to polish tarnished brass until it gleamed like new money. He also taught me the rules, and believe me, in this line of work, the rules are everything. Not the city ordinances or the cemetery regulations. No, these were older rules, unwritten, spoken only in hushed tones, passed down from generation to generation of men like us. Men who spent their days among the dead. Most of them seemed superstitious, even quaint at first. Rule number 1, never work alone after sunset. Easy enough. The heat and humidity in New Orleans made daytime work miserable enough. No one wanted to be out there at night anyway, unless it was for a ghost tour, and those guys never stuck around long enough to see anything real. Rule number 2, always leave an offering. A small coin, a flower, a sip of water poured onto the ground. A gesture of respect. For what? My uncle never said explicitly, just that it was for the residents. Rule number 3, never, under any circumstances, open a crypt you are not explicitly tasked to. This was about more than just legalities. It was about respect for the dead and whatever lay undisturbed with them. Rule number 4, if you hear your name called, do not answer immediately. Wait 3 counts. Then, and only then, acknowledge the sound. This one always gave me a shiver. My uncle said it was a way to filter out unwanted attention. There were dozens of these rules, some mundane, some deeply unsettling. I learned them, I lived by them, and for a long time, I believed they were just a way for old men to make sense of a strange and isolating profession. Until 3 months ago. That's when the new contract came in. The St. Jude Cemetery Annex. St. Jude's itself is old, even by New Orleans standards. Weather-beaten and grand, with monuments that scrape the sky. But the annex was something else. It was tucked away, almost hidden, behind a crumbling brick wall that looked like it had been erected in a hurry and then forgotten. My uncle had always avoided it, said it was bad juju, but he was retired now, and I had bills to pay. The annex was a sprawling maze of neglected crypts, many of them listing precariously, their marble facades stained with black mold and their iron gates rusted shut. It was a massive undertaking, promising months of work and a hefty sum. I was eager, I was foolish. The first few weeks were uneventful, if backbreaking. Just me, a power washer, buckets of cleaner, and a whole lot of elbow grease. I was working on a row of interconnected family tombs, each one older and more elaborate than the last. I started at one end, systematically cleaning, scrubbing, repairing. The silence in the annex was different from other cemeteries. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air itself was holding its breath. Even the omnipresent sound of cicadas seemed muted here. One Tuesday, I was deep in the annex, near a particularly ornate crypt with a faded, almost illegible name carved above its iron door. The air around it felt colder than usual, a damp chill that permeated my bones despite the scorching New Orleans summer. I was focused on scraping away layers of dried moss from a nearby mausoleum when I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from inside the ornate crypt. My first thought was rats, or maybe a possum had found its way inside. Animal intrusions were common, though usually they were dead by the time I found them. I paused, listened. The scratching continued, rhythmic, almost deliberate, like fingernails dragging across stone. I remembered rule number 3. Never, under any circumstances, open a crypt you are not explicitly tasked to meet. I wasn't tasked to open this one. My job was external cleaning and repair. But curiosity, that most human of flaws, gnawed at me. And the scratching, it was too regular, too intentional to be an animal. It sounded desperate. I knelt, pressing my ear against the cold, damp stone. The scratching grew louder, accompanied by a faint, rustling sound, like dry leaves being disturbed. Then, I heard it. A whisper, so faint, so breathy. It could have been the wind, but it wasn't. It was a voice. Let me out. My blood ran cold. Every hair on my arm stood on end. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't a trick of the light or the wind. This was something else. Something in there was trying to communicate, trying to escape. I scrambled back, stumbling over a loose paving stone. My gut screamed at me to run, to leave the annex and never look back. But my feet, rooted to the spot by a horrifying fascination, wouldn't move. I stared at the crypt door, the ancient iron bars, the dark, shadowed opening. The scratching stopped. The whispering ceased. The silence that descended was even more terrifying than the sounds that had preceded it. It was the silence of something waiting, watching. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Rule number 4. If you hear your name called, do not answer immediately. Wait 3 counts. Then, and only then, acknowledge the sound. I hadn't heard my name, but the rule flashed in my mind, a desperate attempt to cling to some semblance of order in this chaos. I counted to 3, my voice a shaky whisper. Hello. Nothing. Only the oppressive, heavy silence. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, jumping at every shadow, every creak of the old cemetery. I didn't go near that crypt again. When I finally packed up my tools, the sun was already dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery streaks. I broke rule number 1. Never work alone after sunset. I was still there, alone, the shadows lengthening around me like skeletal fingers. I ran that day, ran out of the annex like a man possessed, not stopping until I was back in the noisy, vibrant chaos of the French Quarter. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, the heat, too much coffee. But the memory of that scratching, that desperate whisper, burrowed deep into my mind. I didn't go back to the annex for 2 days. I called in sick, mumbled something about a stomach bug. My friends, used to my solitary nature, didn't press. But the thought of that contract, the money, gnawed at me, and a perverse sense of duty. I'd started the job. I had to finish it. When I finally returned, the air felt even heavier. The silence was palpable, almost suffocating. I steered clear of that specific crypt, focusing on other sections of the annex, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I turned my back, I felt a prickling sensation on my neck, as if unseen eyes were scrutinizing my every move. Then came the dreams. Vivid, terrifying nightmares that clung to me even after I woke up, leaving me drenched in sweat and gasping for air. I was always in the annex, always alone, always hearing that scratching. But in the dreams, the whisper wasn't just, "Let me out." It was my name. Arthur. Whispered with a terrible wet rasp, like something struggling to speak through a throat filled with grave dust. One morning, after a particularly brutal nightmare, I arrived at the annex to find something new. A small black doll, crudely fashioned from twigs and cloth, impaled with a rusty nail, lay at the base of the ornate crypt I'd heard the sounds from. Voodoo, a curse, a warning. My uncle's words echoed in my mind. For the residents. What if it wasn't just respect they demanded? What if it was something more, sinister? I picked up the doll, my fingers trembling. The nail was still sharp, and a single drop of blood welled up where it pricked my skin. As I looked at the doll, I heard it again, faintly from inside the crypt. That whisper, "Arthur." I froze. This was different. This was not a dream. This was real. And it had called my name. My mind raced. Rule number 4. If you hear your name called, do not answer immediately. Wait 3 counts. 1, 2, 3. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking, barely more than a croak. Silence. The heavy, watchful silence. I threw the doll to the ground as if it had burned me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. This wasn't some harmless spirit. This was something malevolent, and it knew my name. I tried to work, but my hands shook so badly I couldn't hold my tools steady. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every distant sound echoed ominously. I felt an overwhelming urge to run, to flee this place and never look back. But the voice had spoken my name. It felt like a hook, pulling me in. Over the next few days, the incidents escalated. Tools would go missing, only to reappear in impossible places. The air around me would grow inexplicably cold, even in the midday sun. And the whispers, they became more frequent, more insistent. Always my name, always from that same ornate crypt. "Arthur, come closer. Arthur, I'm lonely. Arthur, I want to play." I started carrying a small, blessed crucifix my grandmother had given me years ago, clutching it tightly in my pocket. It did nothing. The cold remained. The whispers persisted. One sweltering afternoon, I was cleaning the marble facade of a tomb a few yards from the cursed crypt. My back was to it, but I could feel its presence, a palpable weight pressing against me. I was scrubbing a particularly stubborn patch of mildew when I felt a faint tug on the back of my shirt. I froze. No one else was here. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Nothing. I turned back to my work, my breath catching in my throat. Then, a cold, clammy touch brushed against my neck, like fingers, icy and delicate. I gasped, dropping my brush. I whirled around again, my eyes wide with terror. Still nothing. But the air around me was suddenly heavy with a cloying scent, like dead flowers and something else. Something metallic and sickly sweet. Blood? Rot? I knew then I couldn't keep pretending. Whatever was in that crypt, it wasn't just trapped. It was reaching out. It was hunting, and I was the prey. I went home that night and tried to drink myself into oblivion. It didn't work. The whispers followed me, echoing in the silence of my apartment. Arthur. The next morning, driven by a desperate need to understand, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started researching the St. Jude Cemetery Annex. It was difficult. Most of the official records were sparse, many of them destroyed in various floods and hurricanes over the centuries. But I finally found a dusty old book in the city archives, a brittle, forgotten tome detailing the history of the city's cemeteries. And there, in a faded, barely legible entry under the St. Jude Cemetery Annex, I found it. The name of the family interred in that ornate crypt. The Dubois family. Not just any family, but a notoriously reclusive and eccentric lineage, known for their dark practices, rumors of which had lingered in whispers for generations. They were said to have dabbled in forbidden arts, to have made pacts with things best left undisturbed. The last entry for the Dubois crypt was from over a century ago. A single line. Sealed due to unforeseen circumstances. Unforeseen circumstances. The euphemism chilled me to the bone. What kind of circumstances led to a crypt being sealed, not just locked, but truly sealed, as if to contain something? I thought of the doll, the whispers, the touch. I returned to the annex the following day, armed not with cleaning supplies, but with a crowbar. I knew it was insane. I knew I was breaking every single rule my uncle had ever taught me. But the fear had transmuted into something else. A desperate, consuming need to know, to face it, to stop it, or to be consumed by it. I wasn't sure which. I approached the Dubois crypt, the crowbar feeling heavy and inadequate in my trembling hands. The scratching was louder now, more frantic, as if whatever was inside sensed my intention. The whispers were a chorus, a cacophony of sound that clawed at my sanity. Arthur, you came back. Arthur, release me. Arthur, let's play, Arthur. I ignored them, focusing on the rusted, corroded lock on the crypt's iron gate. It was ancient, solid, but years of neglect had weakened it. I jammed the crowbar into the crevice and put my weight into it. The metal groaned, protesting, but with a final desperate shove, the lock shrieked and snapped, tearing away from the door. The gate swung inwards with a slow, agonizing groan, revealing the darkness within. A wave of icy air, thick with the stench of decay, and something else, something indescribably foul, washed over me. My stomach revolted, and I almost gagged. I pulled out my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam pierced the inky blackness, revealing a narrow stone-lined passage. The air was suffocatingly still, the silence now absolute, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. I took a shaky step inside. The passage was short, leading to a small circular chamber. In the center, on a raised stone slab, lay a coffin. Not a typical coffin, but a massive iron-bound sarcophagus, its surface etched with strange swirling symbols that seemed to writhe in the weak beam of my light. It was sealed with heavy chains, thick with rust, and dozens of locks. And then I saw it, or rather felt it. From the cracks in the sarcophagus, a thin black mist was seeping out, swirling like smoke. It was cold, so cold it burned, and it pulsed with an undeniable malevolence. The mist solidified, coalescing into vague, shifting shapes. And then I heard it, not a whisper this time, but a low, guttural growl, emanating from within the sarcophagus. My flashlight beam trembled, dancing across the surface of the iron coffin. I noticed something I hadn't seen from the outside. Scratches, deep, gouged marks on the inside of the iron, as if something had been desperately trying to claw its way out. Then, from the mist, a voice, clearer now, but still wet and raspy, filled the chamber. It wasn't a whisper. It was a command. You opened the gate. The mist began to swirl faster, taking on a more defined form. Not human, never human. It was a swirling vortex of shadows and malice, with 2 points of burning crimson light for eyes. You will serve. Panic seized me, absolute and consuming. This wasn't some poor, restless spirit. This was ancient, powerful, and it was awake. I stumbled backward, desperate to get out, to escape the suffocating presence of whatever was in that tomb. My foot caught on something, and I fell, hitting my head on the stone floor. The phone skittered away, its flashlight beam swinging wildly, illuminating the horror. The swirling mist solidified further, forming a gaunt, skeletal figure, impossibly tall, with limbs too long, too thin, and those burning red eyes. It had no discernible mouth, yet the voice resonated through the chamber, vibrating in my bones. You are mine. I scrambled to my feet, my vision blurry, my head throbbing. I could feel the cold radiating from the creature seeping into me, numbing my limbs. It was pulling me in. I remembered one more rule, the final rule, the one my uncle had only ever mentioned once, in a hushed, terrified whisper, when he thought I wasn't listening. If you ever find yourself in the presence of something truly ancient, truly malevolent, you must offer a sacrifice. Not a coin, not a flower, a piece of yourself, a memory, a hope, something it can consume to sate its hunger, just enough to let you escape. It was a desperate, insane gambit, but I had nothing else. As the shadowy figure began to drift towards me, those burning red eyes fixed on mine, I reached into my mind, into the deepest, most cherished parts of myself. I thought of my first love, a girl named Sarah, with eyes like emeralds and a laugh that could chase away any shadow. I thought of my dream of opening my own small cafe, a place where I could bake and serve coffee, a life far away from the silent cities of the dead. I thought of the warmth of the sun on my face, the taste of a good meal, the feeling of quiet contentment, and with every ounce of will I possessed, I ripped them from my consciousness, offering them up. "Take them," I screamed, my voice raw, echoing in the confined space. "Take my love, take my dreams, take my joy, just let me go." The creature paused. Its red eyes seemed to flicker like hungry flames. The swirling mist around it pulsed, and I felt an agonizing, wrenching sensation in my mind, as if something was being physically torn from me. It was like watching pieces of my soul being devoured, leaving gaping, empty holes. The memories faded, becoming vague, formless things I could no longer grasp. The emotions associated with them withered and died. Sarah's face blurred. Her laugh became a distant, unidentifiable sound. My dreams of the cafe dissolved into smoke. The creature seemed to absorb them, its shadowy form growing subtly denser, its red eyes glowing with a faint, satisfied hunger. It was still there, still horrifying, but the immediate, crushing malevolence seemed to lessen, just for a moment. It was sated, for now. "Go," the voice rasped, the sound a low hiss that reverberated through the crypt. "But no, the door is open, now." It was a warning, a promise. I didn't need to be told twice. I stumbled back out of the crypt, not even bothering to close the gate. I ran through the annex, through the rest of St. Jude's, through the streets of New Orleans, not stopping until I was miles away, gasping for breath. The sounds of the city a jarring, welcome contrast to the silence of the crypt. I never went back to the St. Jude Cemetery annex. I abandoned the contract, the money, everything. I moved out of New Orleans a week later, sold everything I owned, and disappeared. I couldn't stay, not after what I'd unleashed. Now, I live in a small, anonymous town, far from the humid air and the ancient cemeteries of Louisiana. I work a mundane job, something quiet, something that requires no thought. I try to forget, but I can't. The holes in my mind are always there. The missing memories, the lost emotions. I can't remember Sarah's face, only the vague concept of a great loss. My dreams are just empty. It's like a part of me has been surgically removed, leaving a phantom ache. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, or when the silence stretches too long, I hear it. A faint scratching, a distant whisper. Arthur, I didn't just clean crypts in New Orleans. I opened one, and something came out. Something that remembered my name. And I know, with a bone-deep certainty, that one day it will come calling again. And this time, I may not have anything left to offer. The rules, they were there for a reason, and I broke them all.